Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. New Year's is traditionally a time for looking back on the events of the previous year and looking forward to see what you could do to improve yourself in the year to come. That's why I've chosen today to do this topic, which I've been very excited to talk about for quite some time. What happens when a judge makes a mistake? I've graded this as the highest star level on my difficulty scale because admitting your mistakes is among the toughest skills for anyone, judge or otherwise, to master. That being the case, there's at least two factors I can think of that make this an especially challenging task for judges. First, judges are set in a position of authority, which naturally works against the humility that's required to admit and own up to your mistakes. Second, judges are typically held in extremely high esteem by the player base, which, for me at least, makes it all that much more heartbreaking every time I have to shatter that illusion and admit that I was wrong. Still though, this is something that everybody needs to work on, and judging for the win definitely does include looking at your mistakes as critically as you look at your successes. So let's get started. Believe it or not, this is actually something that has an official protocol associated with it. If a judge makes a mistake in a tournament setting, then they should of course find the players and apologize to them and point out what the mistake was, explaining what the correct thing should have been. And, if possible, fix anything that happened in the game as a result of that mistake. There's also a couple of exceptional things that can happen if this is the case. If a judge tells a player wrong information and the player acts on it, then the head judge can downgrade any penalty that might result from that wrong information. So, for example, if a player asks a judge whether a specific card is legal in the format that they're playing before the event starts, and the judge mistakenly answers in the affirmative, then that player would not get a game loss, even though that's typically the penalty for playing a card that's not legal in the format in your deck. Additionally, if a judge gives a player incorrect information about their game, and the player makes a game decision based on that information, the head judge can enact a backup, which is usually something you can only do in situations where a player has committed an infraction. These sorts of measures are meant to mitigate any damage caused by the judges and help to restore the integrity of the events, even in situations where judges make mistakes just like any other person. A lot of players I've talked to seem to think that judges making mistakes is a really rare occurrence. I hate to tell everybody this, but judges do make mistakes, and even though it's not exactly common, it definitely does happen more than a lot of people probably think. To give you a little bit of perspective, I would say that a normal judge who is relatively active and took an average number of calls during each event that they did would probably be expected, mathematically, to blow a call every few months. To put it another way, if you were a judge who made a ruling every day for a full year, even if you were 99% accurate, you would still be expected to miss 3 or 4 things over the course of that year. Now, I thought that this was a pretty similar example, so my first impression was that this shouldn't work either. You should have the isolated chapel come into play tapped. However, that is, in fact, not the case. And to see why, we're going to need to do a little bit of a hard deep dive into the comprehensive rules, especially the one that governs this type of replacement effect. So I'm going to pull it up on screen here. As a result, because of this clause in the comprehensive rules, we are allowed to consider isolated chapel to be one of Nick's swamps when we're determining whether or not isolated chapel will enter the battlefield, tapped or untapped. Even though that ability got removed in Layer 6, it's still going to apply in Layer 7 because it started to apply earlier. And so that means that even though Hexdrinker has lost the level up ability, it still will be a 6/6 because of that rule that I just had up on screen. Really awesome, right? As you can see here, what Daybound means is, as it becomes night, you would transform this creature. Now, that's kind of interesting because it's not going to become night in this situation as discussed. Rather, it's night before and after the event that we had happen. The only thing that changed is whether it had the Daybound ability. And that is not what this ability looks for when it's deciding whether you should transform something. Accordingly, even though it's now nighttime, you will not immediately transform the creature. Rather, what will happen is it'll stay on the battlefield with its day face up, even though it's nighttime. In order to transform, it would need to become night. In other words, it would need to transition from day into night. If it's already night out, the only way for this to happen would be to transition from night into day so that it could later transition from day into night. Alright, so there's one final situation that I wanted to talk about before I sign off here. Let's say that we have the exact same thing happening, except we're going to switch which player has which card. In this case, we're going to give Nick the Overwhelming Splendor and Amy the Ruined Halo. what would happen? And remember before that the active player, Amy, has to make her choice first. That means that Amy is going to see that Nick is putting an overwhelming splendor onto the battlefield, and she's going to know that information at the time when she's choosing which card name she wants to name with the Ruined Halo. That means that she could definitely choose to give herself protection from overwhelming splendor, and Nick would be put into that unenviable position that we talked about before of not having any other person that he could have that curse enter the battlefield attached to. Nick would be forced to put the overwhelming splendor onto himself, which would be an extremely big turnaround. Yikes. Turns out, when they say everyone makes mistakes, they really do mean everybody, even modestly successful internet celebrity judges. I do take my role as an educational resource very seriously, so if you see something that you think is a mistake or an oversight in one of my videos, definitely send me an email at judgingftw@gmail.com so that I can take the offending video down. One final thing. While I would never advocate dwelling on your mistakes, certainly it is a good idea every time you make one to look back on it and think about what you could do different to reduce the severity or the frequency of future mistakes. So when I took a look at the mistakes I made over the past year, I saw a really common thread, which was me rushing to meet a production deadline. While I'm extremely proud that I was able to stick to one video a day every day for the entirety of this past year, I do feel that certain times during the year I was feeling rushed, and that definitely led to a reduction in quality and even some of the mistakes that you just saw. Starting in 2022, I'm not going to be uploading every day anymore. This was a tough call to make, but I think it's for the best in the name of sustainability for this channel. I don't know yet what the new schedule is going to look like, but it's definitely going to involve having weekends off. I'm probably looking at Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday through Friday as the two front runners, and I'm going to spend the next couple of months playing around with things in order to see what feels right. If you're someone who's grown used to watching Judging for the Win every single day, thank you so much, but I hope you can understand that this change is for the best. In the meantime, definitely make sure you're subscribed so you'll be able to see all of my future updates. And also, smash that like button. That doesn't even make sense. I'm not saying that. I also want to assure everybody that this channel isn't going anywhere. I just celebrated 4,000 subscribers, which I think is incredible. That's a fourfold increase in my subscriber base over just this past year. I have no idea what the future of the channel will hold, but as long as people are still interested in seeing the videos that I produce, I'm still going to be putting them out. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody who's supported this channel in any way, whether that be through my Patreon, by suggesting topics for future daily rulings, by subscribing, by commenting, by sharing my channel with other people. Thank you all so much. You're the reason why I do this, and I'm going to keep on doing this as long as you're here to watch my videos. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, even though you won't be hearing me say it quite as often, I hope you have a great day.